Hi, I'm Reid Swanson,
And I'm Fred Goodman.
and we're part of the Social, Cultural, and Diversity team at the Southern Connecticut Church of Christ.
And we're going to have a discussion about Juneteenth, and we welcome you into the conversation. So why are we talking about this? Why are we talking about this Juneteenth?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I mean, I had to Google last year when I heard about Juneteenth. I'd been out of the U.S. for a long time. I thought that everyone else knew about what it was. I'd never heard of it before. Started to hear some companies talk about it. And so I Googled it and found out, okay, the celebration. And I thought I was just, basically an outsider not knowing what's really going on.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I had to do the same thing. Now, one would think, me being black, that I would know what Juneteenth is, but I really had to research it. And I was shocked when I really found out what it really was. And I do feel it's a part of history. I feel like it's a story that needs to be told. It wasn't a pretty one, but it still needs to be told. And when you look at the facts of the whole situation of their slavery, it's not nice.
Yeah.
I mean, it's depicted in museums and theater. You read it in books, so we all know, the impact and the devastation of slavery.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I think just kind of looking at like the spiritual significance, like, why as a church, why are we looking at this?
Right.
And, I started to look at the Old Testament and started to see, there's a lot of celebrations to really remind people of how God worked. You see the Passover, you see the weeks of the tabernacles. I mean, that's the communion.
Mm-hmm.
The communion is there to remind us of what Christ did for us.
Right.
And so I think, Juneteenth is very similar. I mean, look at the 4th of July.
Right.
4th of July is a celebration of the whole nation. We talk about the Declaration of Independence, but it wasn't even the time when they were actually free from England.
Right. That's an interesting fact, though. It's like everybody else is celebrating, but you got this group of people, this group that it's not my party.
Yeah.
It's not my celebration.
And I think that's why, for me, Juneteenth is so important, because that's really when all of a sudden we made a big step of everybody being really independent, of everyone being free.
Right.
And that's what it's a celebration. It's a celebration about freedom. It's a step in the right direction. Yeah. And, it really reminds us about the fight for freedom and the fight against all forms of oppression in our society. And I think we should celebrate this as a society, but also as the Church of Christ. As a body of God, we should be celebrating all forms of freedom.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And it's like some people might think, well, I don't really need to know about that, or that's not so important to me. But if you're my brother, and this is a very important issue to me, the Bible says that we need to be there for each other.
Yeah.
We need to hold each other up. So, but I like to look at the spiritual aspect of this. Just looking at, from their slavery, and then looking at our lives as Christians. Is there a similarity?
Yeah.
Is there something that can be of parallel, of significance to it?
Yeah, and I think that's what, like, all great celebrations in the Bible, they always have a spiritual connection.
Yeah.
That there's something there. It's not just the celebration itself, but it's how did God work, or what did God do. And,
Right.
I think we heard some of the brothers and sisters talking, the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, that was the official, like the technical time when slaves were freed.
Right.
But because of the split in our nation, the Confederate states and the northern states, and so there was no opportunity for those slaves to be free.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was thinking about, like, spiritually, I was like, the cross is God's way of declaring, it's His proclamation that we're all free from sin.
Yeah.
So that we're all free from the slavery of sin.
Right.
But a lot of people are still living as though they're slaves to sin. And I know, like, if somebody had to come to me and explain to me, what God did for me.
So they brought you the good news.
Yeah.
And it's just like the general going to Texas and bringing them the good news is that, no. You are free. You are no longer under the bonds of slavery.
Yeah.
You are free. And just like, someone brought me the good news, so I feel like my Juneteenth was 1989.
Yeah.
And that's when, I was able to, go through the scriptures, read the Bible, and really learn that sin is like slavery. It captivates you. It really destroys your life, But through Christ and that entrance into baptism is when we can be free.
Yeah. And I think if you think about it, I mean, definitely, they were hearing like rumors about this, that, hey, that in the North slaves are free. They were hearing rumors about that there's a way, to be free from the life of slavery, but they were controlled in the society that they were in. They couldn't get out of it.
Right.
And it wasn't until the North, the armies came down, and it wasn't just the message of freedom, but it was saying, listen, this is how you're going to be free.
Yeah.
We're going to enforce it. And to think about, like in the baptism, the death of Christ, he sets us free.
Yeah.
And we've been called to live a life of freedom in Christ.
Yeah.
And so it's just, and that's why I feel like Juneteenth, there's so many different parallels and different ways that we can look at this. To think about, how the world is in, bondage and, to sin, and that there's still a need to hear the good news.
Yes.
That there's still that need for the personal Juneteenth.
Yes.
And there's still the need for people to go out and explain how to be free.
Yeah, yeah. And I think about it, once I did get the good news, that was now my goal. Let me share this with somebody else. But here's something that I thought about. They were freed, but they had nowhere to go. They had no property. They had no money. But just the fact that I'm telling you, you know what? You are free. That in itself is powerful. They figured it out. They did figure it out, and we saw in history where a group of black politicians and well-to-do blacks, they brought acres and acres of land in Galveston and used it for this celebration.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's, they're kind of looking at like today, so we're kind of looking at the past, but like what does it mean for us today? Yeah. And I think, if you look at it, historically, after the proclamation in Galveston, it didn't take long for different forms of slavery to pop up. There was different forms of oppression. People trying to get these people back into that relationship, of basically cheap labor, free labor, enslaving them again, but in a different way.
Right.
And I think spiritually it's the same thing. Like we have our personal, let's say, Juneteenth. We realize what God's done for us. We get baptized. We're free. But then over time, the forces, our ego, our pride, they want to enslave us again.
Yeah. And you still have to fight against that.
Exactly.
You still have to fight against that.
And you have to be aware of that.
Yeah.
You have to think, hey, wait a minute, I'm, things are trying to enslave me again. And now, I got baptized when I was 23. Now I'm 51.
You're looking good, man.
Yeah, I know. So, but I mean, just think about, I'm like, the things that now want to enslave me are totally different than when I was 23.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like now, like really looking forward to, hey, I want a comfortable life. Like, hey, how can I, where am I in my career? And, there's just so many different things, but I still need to realize, hey, those are trying to enslave me.
Yes.
Yeah. And those are trying to control me.
Yeah.
And then to realize, that, hey, I've been called to be Christ's ambassador. I've been called, to bring the news of reconciliation, to bring the news of forgiveness and freedom to the world.
Right.
To make sure that I don't myself become a slave again.
Yeah.
But then to find those people that are still, that haven't realized that yet, and help them, realize their day of freedom.
Right. So for a Christian, it's a constant fight to stay in the battle, to stay righteous, to stay close to God. And I think, you mentioned earlier, well, what does this mean for today? It's like there's still injustice. So you still have to fight against that. Not everybody is equal. Depending upon, where you live, how much money you make, determines how much you will be accepted. And that's not righteous either. But I think your point is, it's like we are ambassadors of Christ. And I think the work that we're supposed to do to go out to share the good news gives me hope that the world can be totally different. You know, that there can be equality. There can be a respect for one another for someone who's different from you. You know?
Yeah.
It's like there is a hope. There is a hope.
And I mean, the church should be like the reflection of God and His
Right.
wisdom.
Yeah.
And so if you think about, like when Jesus, when He started His ministry, He started by, reading from Isaiah saying, listen, I have come to set the captive free. I have come to help, those that are oppressed.
Mhm.
And so, yes, spiritually, we should be doing this, but also as a church, we should be showing society that we have overcome, that we are working on this, that that we understand the importance of a Juneteenth,
Right.
because it's for the whole society,
Yeah.
and it's God pleasing,
Yeah.
and so I think it's really it's really exciting. I feel like I'm
Yeah.
learning something new,
Yeah.
and
So am I. So much.
yeah. And but also the spiritual ramifications,
Yeah.
and the implications, and then just to figure out like, hey, we have had that Juneteenth in our lives,
Right.
and then just to think about, okay, so our job is to continue to make sure to spread this news,
Yeah.
within the church, but also within the society,
Right.
in our neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And then also, like, for those people that haven't experienced this Juneteenth yet, for
Mhm.
those people that really feel enslaved,
Yeah.
by whatever it is that's controlling them, so if that's you, then please reach out to somebody
Yeah.
that that has experienced their personal Juneteenth, that has a relationship with God,
Right.
and ask them how you can start to live a life of freedom and be a force of change in our society.
Well said, brother.
Well-
Well said, man.